Dear Zhou, we're meeting at the sidelines of the geopolitics of the three-theater world. It's a track to dialogue that brings together participants from 20 countries in what we consider to be the three main theaters of geopolitical contestation, which is East Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Could you help us understand the situation in East Asia a little bit better? Who are the main powers there? What are their interests and motivations? And would you believe that the situation in this theater, which is the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan Strait, the East and the South China Sea, is this situation going to escalate or de-escalate?
In East Asia, of course, we know those most important powers from China to Japan, South Korea, so on and so forth. But of course, there is also most visible country, that is the United States, the physical presence, in this region. So we are having all these countries all together. In terms of a situation, I would argue that, relatively speaking, this region looks more quiet than Europe and the Middle East, where apparently we're having two wars. But we just cannot take it for granted because there are a lot of potential hotspots. I believe on top of the list is actually South China Sea, because there might be some accidents. Well, why is that? Because Americans would consider that they have to defend the freedom of navigation by sending ships and aircrafts to where China consider to be China's rocks and islands, for example, in the South China Sea and in China's exclusive economic zones. And this kind of different understanding of international maritime law actually would make these two countries very difficult to accommodate each other. We all know the deadly clash of two aircrafts in 2001, and I have no confidence that this won't happen in the future, although it's fair to say that neither country want to have this kind of accidents to happen again. But the irony is, for decades, the United States and China fight over one Chinese term, 安全, which means security for China and safety for the United States. So we could quote even the same article of the UN Convention on Law of the Sea to fight against each other. But having said all this, I believe it could be accidents or even deadly accidents, but of course it won't be comparable, say, to a conflict in Taiwan Straits. Then the question is, how likely is such a conflict in Taiwan Strait? I don't believe it is very likely, even in the foreseeable future, because the Chinese leadership is still talking about peaceful reunification. That indicates that the Chinese leadership still has confidence. The Chinese leaders are not impatient, right? So the growth of China could lead to two totally different directions. Would growth of strength lead China to become more impatient, or would it give China more confidence about its own strengths so it can still believe peaceful reunification is possible? So how could we resolve this issue? My answer is very simple. Just let the Chinese government believe that peaceful reunification is still possible. So long as we believe it is possible, so we won't use force, and we can still wait. Look at Ma Ying-jeou, the predecessor of Tsai Ing-wen and Lai Ching-te. He didn't promise peaceful reunification or give any timetable, but he just didn't rule it out. He believes that the people across the strait are Chinese, and that gives the mainland a lot of assurances. And the people always talk about the stick side of the policy from People's Republic of China. But people forgot that we also have offered a lot of carrots. For example, we have a lot of preferential treatment policies toward the Taiwanese who work, across the strait in Fujian province. The children could just go to any kindergarten like other, children from mainland China. So I don't believe that a war is inevitable. So I believe we are still having patience, and I hope one day we can still have a peaceful reunification. Just think for a moment. China, by PPP, is already the largest economy in the world. By GDP, it is the second largest country in the world. So how can the most powerful nation on earth afford still to be a country that is divided?
Lots of complicated issues, also very contested issues, and that's only one theater, but we're talking about three theaters now. Obviously in Europe we have a hot war. Also the conflicts in the Middle East seem to be further escalating. China has interests in all of these theaters. So how does China navigate in this three theater world?
The war in Ukraine surprised me in one aspect. That is, people's expectation for China simply grows. Yeah, so people would ask China, what policy are you going to adopt? Which side are you going to take? Why just can't Chinese president to pick up a phone to tell President Putin to stop the war? And that's the end of the war. It is just not as simple as that. But I believe right now China is really, really powerful or tall enough to hide itself either behind a tree or just to say no, as it is, because Chinese foreign policy in the past was more characterized with more no's than yes, right? Because of its sensitivity to world sovereignty, so on and so forth. But I believe China has already have two turning points. One is for the PLA, that is Chinese counter-piracy operation in the Gulf of Aden, has actually turned the Navy into a blue water Navy. The second turning point occurred in the Middle East. That is China's successful mediation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This kind of success would actually make China more proactive in its future endeavors in helping the world as an honest broker.